like, about 12 months ago, I quit my job at Social Chain, right? And when I quit my job, I had a little bit of a personal crisis, because having become known as this social media CEO, when you leave that role, you figure out that sometimes we're a little bit too attached to our identity, and you question, well, what do I do next in my life? Do I just go and become a social media CEO again? And that's the tempting thing to do. It's tempting to then follow that label that you've kind of earned yourself through your accomplishments. And so at that point in my life, I had time to take stock about the things that I loved and who I was. And the truth was, and I think this applies to everybody, I learned from that kind of reflection that I'm a very multifaceted person. I'm not just a social media CEO. Right? And there's so many things I loved. Music was one of them. I remember the first time I went to theatre, and I was just in awe of the cast and the production and the storytelling. I started DJing, and my podcast, which is a medium of storytelling as well, was another one of them. So when we came to putting on this show, we had the idea of doing a live podcast. Really, we wanted to fuse together all of those mediums of storytelling, because I deeply believe that everybody is allowed to be an artist. Permission to be an artist and to express yourself through your art shouldn't be reserved for just a few. And if my podcast has taught me anything, it's that we have to express ourselves to be healthy in our minds and to be healthy in our lives. So this is our musical expression of all those wonderful mediums to tell you a story, one that is about the human experience. Thank you so much for being here today. This is our last night at the Palladium, and it's just the most awe-inspiring honour to step out and see all of you here. So let's begin. Manchester, walking the Walworn Path, wearing what I believe to be someone else's shoes. I was sat there in my university dorm room trying to get my way into the corporate world, trying to get a degree in, honestly, anything, because that's what everyone had told me to do. That's what society told me success was for me. And so that's what I was trying to pursue. But there was this other voice, which I always talk about with my team, with my family, that felt really suppressed in my core. And it was quiet and it was strong at the same time. And that voice seemed to know something I didn't. It seemed to know that those weren't my shoes, and that wasn't going to be my destination, and that I could do greater things. And I know Jamal Edwards' friends are in the house tonight, and Jamal was a big inspiration to me for nurturing. For me, I used to stalk him on Skype. I was trying to do anything to have a conversation with the guy, but he let me know vicariously that I could, that voice inside me wasn't crazy, and that I was capable of and deserving of doing greater things that were more in line with that voice inside.
I, from a very young age, just felt there was this strong inner voice. And I believe everyone has it. This isn't me being religious or spiritual or woo-woo. This is me saying that there is a voice that we all hear in our minds, in our hearts, in our heads, wherever you want to say it is. It's there.
In a really annoying way about my true potential, about the life that I could live, and about who I could probably become. And when I tried to ignore that voice and suppress it and resist it, it only seemed to get louder, more persistent, and more certain with me. And that's the thing I learned about your dreams from doing my podcast, that you can give up on them, but they never seem to give up on us. I'm too old, Steve. Get a lot of that. How dare you? How dare you disrespect yourself in such a way? How dare you believe that social, baseless assumption that with age comes this decline in human potential? With age, as the older members of my podcast guests have taught me, comes tremendous wisdom. And wisdom ends up being our net worth, so you've got to spend it, right? You've got to spend it. And it's funny because, I told myself I was too young when I was 20 years old. I started to think I'm too young, I'm too inexperienced to start a business. I need to wait till I'm older. And then when people are 50, they tell themselves they're too old. As if our potential only deserves this airtime between this narrow window of our lives. Someone once said to me on a podcast, they said, you should look at it like this. You should ask yourself, are you alive? Can you breathe? And if the answer is yes, then you've still got value that the world needs. And Jamal, he poured out that value for the world. Man, he poured it out. And everybody he touched, you've seen the reaction, he poured it out. And he's been a reminder to me, his passing this week reminded me that I've got to keep going. I've got to keep listening to that voice inside and pouring out that value. No excuses, Steve. No excuses. And some people spend months, they spend years, they spend a lifetime ignoring that voice inside. And I wrote about it in my book, Bronnie Ware. She was an Australian palliative nurse. She would sit there with people in the days before they passed away. And she would say to them, what's your number one regret in life? And it turns out the most common regret of people as they lay there on their deathbed is that they didn't live a life true to themselves. They said a bunch of other things, but the most common regret was that. And I'm not going to take the risk of finding out for myself. They have a retrospective clarity that I haven't earned yet, so I'm going to believe them. And as I sat there some 10 years ago in Manchester, Metropolitan University, in my student dorm room, contemplating that voice inside, the one that told me that I could do more, I could pursue myself, eventually that voice started to win. And I decided that my life was going to be my life. I was going to live it on my terms, chasing my dreams. Because at the end of the day, as those deathbed patients taught me, it's going to be my regret. So the last thing I want is to sit there regretting someone else's choice. That thing inside me was too strong. So I remember calling my mum on my little Nokia 33, whatever it was, brick phone, getting myself ready, because my mum, you know, she's from Africa, so education, if you've got immigrant parents, is a very, very highly valued thing, understandably, because it's a more sort of scarce, it's a more scarce commodity in Africa where my mum's from. And I called her, I said, Mum, how's your day going? I go, Mum, I've got something to tell you. I said, Mum, I'm going to drop out of university, I'm going to start a business. I don't need to tell you how that conversation went. I don't know what I was expecting. And my very unhappy mother told me in no uncertain terms that she'd never speak to me again if I did that. And not just that, but she was going to try and persuade the rest of my family to follow suit. And weeks after that, I don't know, you know, I went home back to Plymouth on the megabus. I got home, I said, Mum, started chatting. She was being so nice to me. I thought maybe she's gotten over it. Turns out my dad, for an easy life, I think he tried to tell her that I was still at university because it was causing him problems. So I broke it to her. I said, Mum, I've dropped out of university, I'm going for it. Oh my God, the rage. Ran at my bedroom door, kicked it. I wish you were my son. And I remember going home on the megabus that night and thinking I probably won't speak to her again. And I went home back to Manchester on the megabus and I turned inside to that voice that was so strong inside of me, and I made a commitment to the voice that day that I was going to let it guide me for the rest of my life. I dropped out of university and off I went. Live in accordance with your outside world, we eventually find misery, right? But if we live in accordance with our inside world, we'll be fortunate enough to find happiness, because there is a voice inside you, one that will whisper all day long, and it will say, I know that this is right for me, and I also know that that is wrong. There's no parent, no stranger, no friend to the side, because the truth's already there. It is that voice inside.
I didn't feel like a conformist. I didn't want to be a sheep. I wanted to be the shepherd. I didn't want to just conform to the expectations of what society deems as successful.
No vaping, sir. Sorry.
As my podcast guest taught me over and over again, when you make that choice to go for it, there's no map. It feels like the lights are off because you've never travelled that road before. So you have to turn to your faith. 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 And I felt like I was confident when I went for it. I felt like I believed in myself. Sometimes I felt like I was a little bit delusional. Mal always talked to me about self-belief. He said that was at the heart and the start of the journey. And as I went off on my journey, I had this weird battle going on inside of my internal monologue, even though I thought I was a confident person. And it was these creeping doubts, which I honestly still have today, if I'm being completely honest with you. It's never seemed to go away. And it was these doubts because nobody in my tribe had walked the path that I wanted to walk. Nobody in my circle, none of my family had done that before. Nobody had achieved the things that I wanted to achieve. Doubts placed in me by my total inexperience, by naivety, maybe even my age. And doubt's placed in me by that subtle, skeptical reaction you get from your friends and family when you tell them about your ideas and your dreams. But they don't want to tell you with words, their face says it for them. You know the one? You're laughing because you know the one, right? You're laughing at me. Because that's exactly what they did, they laughed at me. Right? That look they give you when their face tells you they don't think you're going to do it. They don't think you're capable of that. They think you're crazy. But the other side of that internal argument was controlled by that insecure dreamer in me. The one that grew up in that bankrupt household in Plymouth. Longing for freedom, freedom of choice. Freedom from my parents, my mum and dad, screaming at each other every single day about the money we couldn't have and the bills that we could never pay. The dreamer in me, the dreamer in me was visualizing the life I was about to earn. The Lamborghinis! That was my dream. A Lamborghini Aventador. You're nodding. Still yours. A Lamborghini Aventador. The money! The freedom of choice. Oh, wow. And that part of me on my left shoulder was saying, them hates can't tell you nothing. Wait till I get my money. I'm wearing the Yeezys tonight. And as that internal argument raged on inside of me between doubt and faith, and doubt and faith, and doubt and faith, my logical mind steps in and reminds me that fear is what creates doubt, and that comes when we believe we're in the presence of risk. When we believe we're in the presence of risk. So you have to ask yourself, and this is what I always do, and I still do this today whenever I find myself veering off into doubt, which happens a lot. I have to say, what is the risk? And to understand the risk, you have to be clear on the objective of life. And I think the objective of life for me is to try and be fulfilled and happy. That's my fundamental objective of my life, simply to be happy, however you want to define that for yourself. And when you truly, deeply understand that that's the North Star, then anything that compromises your chance of happiness, then that is the risk. When you find yourself in that shitty one-sided relationship, which I found myself in once upon a time, that toxic friendship, that awful city, that soul-destroying job, then the real risk must be not leaving, must be staying, not quitting. The risk is choosing the certain misery of your current situation over the uncertainty you'll encounter as you go in the direction of where you believe your happier life exists. That is the risk. If the goal of life is to be fulfilled, then the risk, as my podcast guest told me over and over again, for me, was staying exactly where society told me I should be. That was the risk. And if happiness is the goal, then in fact, dropping out, having that really uncomfortable conversation with my mother was not the risk. It was the only chance I had of finding that fulfillment, so it was the easy thing to do because it was the only thing to do. So what I did wasn't brave. I found it really bizarre when I did these interviews and press interviews and stuff. People sit there and they think I'm this like brave, courageous person. But I think the people that procrastinate on their opportunity have been really, really happy and fulfilled, like those deathbed patients taught me. I think you're the risk takers. I think you're the brave ones because you're the ones that have the guts to take the most important risk of all. The risk of your chance of happiness. For what? And I sit there with some, my guests, and they tell me, the psychologists tell me it's because of comfort, it's because of certainty. I'm not brave enough to take that risk. 10 years of people thinking I'm some brave, courageous dude. Until I found out that I'm a coward. Fear of risk is, I think it was Professor Stephen Peters taught me on the podcast, helped us to survive 10,000 years ago when that was our goal, survival. But it gets in our way 10,000 years later when our goal is to thrive. And as I started my journey towards my happier life, that internal argument continued to rage on inside of me between doubt and faith, and doubt and faith. You're crazy. Wait till I get my money. But maybe you're crazy. Ignore them. They can't tell you nothing. The key isn't to try and win that argument or to figure out if you're right or wrong. I just focus on the moment. I say, is this my path? Are these my shoes? Is this where I belong? Because I tell you, there's been many times in my life where I thought I was crazy. And most of the time I was wrong. Most of the time I was wrong.
I remember when, I remember when.
But it wasn't a happy day. It was one of the most miserable, confusing days of my entire life. Look, I read it here in my diary. I wrote when I was 18 years old, and this is why I called my book Happy Sexy Millionaire. I wrote, that was my goal. And on that day, as I sat there, that's why I pursued my dreams. That was what I thought I was aiming for. And on that big day, the day I got the million, the day I could finally afford that Lamborghini Aventador, the freedom, I felt like shit. And I asked myself, I ponder this a lot because I sit there with some of the most accomplished people in the world at their disciplines on the podcast. Why did that day feel like such an anticlimax? And it's because I was just that kid from a broke family I'm just that kid that had that deep self-inflicted shame for not being like my rich white friends. I'm still just that kid that wanted a home that I could bring friends and potentially a girlfriend back to, so I could stop lying about where we lived in Devon. And my podcast has taught me that we're all just those kids, living out the stories we told ourselves about ourselves long ago, running around sometimes like desperate, headless chickens, seeking validation from all the things that made us feel invalid when we were younger. So was my journey, right, I contemplated this some years later when I was like 25, 26, was my journey actually ambition, or was it just insecurity? Maybe it was the ambition to escape my insecurities. There was this day, which some of you talked to me about in the meet and greet earlier, where I was 18 in Ross Side, and I was so broke at this point. My mum was speaking to me, they stopped sending me the tenner I was for once in a while. And so I went out and I thought, okay, no chance of eating today, so I'm going to have to try and find some, like, that success alone was it. And I thought romantic and platonic relationships were some kind of, like, optional extra that would likely get in the way of me getting that Lamborghini Aventador. So I disregarded them. I disregarded them for pretty much my entire adult life, and eventually I paid the price. Earlier I said that our ancestors left a simple message in our genetic code, one that said, "You two shall struggle forward together." And after 115 episodes of my podcast, I've come to learn the significance of that word together. Together. We were born from tribes bound together by love and united in this shared mission, mutually collaborating to create a better tomorrow and to survive. I said if you remove the struggle from the human, they fall into disarray. But if you remove the tribe, you make an even bigger mistake.
And we are the first humans ever to try to live without a tribe. And Professor Cacioppo proved two things. One is that human beings separated from tribes, lonely humans, become depressed and anxious. Everyone listening to your show, why do we exist? One of the key reasons is because our ancestors on the savannas of Africa were really good at one thing. They weren't faster than the animals they took down. They weren't bigger than the animals they took down in a lot of cases. But they were much better at banding together into groups and cooperating. That's our superpower as a species, right?
Yeah.
Just like bees evolved to need a hive, humans evolved to need a tribe.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how I reacted, my son. Please, try to understand me. In Nigeria, we do not have the chance to educate ourselves. Still to this day, I cannot read, I cannot write. When we were born, we came to England and I started a business because nobody would give me work. And it failed. They robbed my shop. They abused me. And I've struggled in business for 20 years. This is why we never had money, why we didn't have nice things, why there was no holiday, no Christmas, no birthday. I wanted a better life for you. So when you called me and told me you wanted to start a business, like I had, and leave your education, that broke my heart. Business caused me nothing but pain, and I didn't want you to feel the pain that I had felt. I thought university would give you something I never had, an education, freedom to choose, and a way to provide for your family one day. I stood in your way because I loved you. I'm so sorry, my son. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of who you've become. Thank you for helping our family. I love you.
Mum, you don't have to apologize to me. You made me the man I am today. You showed me hard work, discipline, love, conviction, and I will never forget the sacrifice you made. I saw what you went through in business, we all did. So when you stood in my way, I already knew why. That decision came from a place of your love and your pain. Thank you. I love you. Forever and always. So I guess that's been the lesson that's been present all night. We all fundamentally want the same thing, whether we're black or white, or we're left or right. The story of my business partner, my girlfriend, and then even my mum. Until we learn how to communicate, we'll always find something wrong.
And I always lie.